The Bible, a cornerstone of faith for billions, a source of solace, wisdom and moral guidance. But within its ancient pages lurk stories seldom told, narratives veiled in shadow, echoes of the uncanny. We call these the forbidden files, stored deep within the sacred archives, waiting for a curious mind. Among these forgotten tales, one stands out, shrouded in controversy, a ghost story embedded in Holy Writ, so unsettling it was silenced from pulpits. For centuries it remained a whisper, a testament to events that challenge belief. It questions the very boundaries between our world and the next. What power does such a story hold? Why was it deemed too dangerous to share? Welcome, truth seeker, to the Crooked Key Society. We are the keepers of forgotten lore, the unsealers of ancient mysteries. Tonight we delve into such a file, one that pulls back the curtain on a side of scripture rarely glimpsed. We journey beyond the familiar parables, into the deeper, darker recesses, where the sacred meets the spectral. Prepare to question what you thought you knew. These narratives are more than mere curiosities. They are windows into the ancient mind, reflections of humanity's eternal dance with the unknown, the divine and the departed. What did our ancestors truly believe about the spirits that walk among us, or those that wait beyond the veil? The answers may surprise you, they may even unnerve you. Let us begin our descent. Our focus turns to the Old Testament, a collection of writings vast and profound. Its scrolls chronicle laws, lineages and wars. They paint a vivid picture of a world steeped in ancient traditions, a time when the veil between worlds seemed thinner, more permeable. Prophets spoke the words of God, but what happened when God fell silent? What happened when darkness loomed? Consider King Saul of Israel, a monarch chosen, then forsaken. He faced an overwhelming enemy. The Philistine armies gathered, formidable and cruel. Divine guidance eluded him. The prophets offered no solace. Dreams brought no visions. Desperation, a cold companion, gripped the heart of the king. He stood on the precipice of ruin. In his despair, Saul made a fateful choice. He sought answers from a forbidden source, a practice condemned by the very laws he upheld: necromancy, the summoning of the dead. He knew the risks, the divine prohibition. Leviticus was clear. Do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritists, for you will be defiled by them. Yet, fear can drive even kings to tread paths angels fear to walk. His transgression would seal his doom. Disguised under the cloak of night, Saul sought the witch of Endor, a woman rumoured to possess dark powers, to commune with those who had passed. He implored her to raise a spirit, not just any spirit, but the formidable prophet Samuel, the king's former mentor, now deceased. What followed was an encounter that echoes through biblical scholarship, the Bible's most explicit and troubling ghost story. This singular, chilling account of necromancy opens a door to a wider spiritual landscape. The Old Testament speaks of more than just the living and their God. It acknowledges a realm of the departed, known in Hebrew as Sheol, a shadowy, ill-defined domain, not a heaven of bliss nor a hell of fire, but a place of quiet, of knowing nothing, or so some passages suggest. Yet the scriptures offer a complex view. They warn sternly against seeking out the dead, against attempting to breach the divide. Should not a people inquire of their God? Isaiah asks, a clear admonition. Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? This prohibition is stark, absolute. It underscores a profound theological boundary, a divine order not to be disturbed by human curiosity or desperation. The Old Testament world, however, was not empty of spiritual entities. Angels, the messengers of Yahweh, appear frequently, bringing tidings, warnings, or divine intervention. Demonic forces, though less defined than in later texts, are hinted at, powers that oppose the divine will. The ancient Israelites navigated a reality populated by more than what met the eye, a world where the spiritual and the material were deeply intertwined. Understanding this context is crucial. Therefore, our exploration tonight ventures into these shadowed corners. We will examine this forbidden ghost story, we will explore the enigmatic concept of Sheol, and we will consider the Old Testament stance on spirits, apparitions, and communication beyond life. Why were such practices condemned? What truths, or perhaps what dangers, did the ancient writers perceive in them? The air hung heavy with impending doom. Across the valley of Jezreel, the Philistine banners rippled. Their armies, a terrifying sea of iron and malice, had gathered at Shunem, poised to strike. Israel trembled. King Saul, their anointed leader, felt the icy grip of fear tighten around his heart. The glories of his early reign, his triumphs over enemies, seemed like distant, fading dreams now. Before him lay the slopes of Gilboa, a battlefield that would soon drink the blood of his men. Saul, a man once filled with the Spirit of God, now found himself utterly alone, spiritually bereft. He had inquired of the Lord, but there was no answer. The heavens were brass, silent and unyielding. No visions came to him in the troubled darkness of night. The Urim and Thummim, sacred tools of divination held by the priests, offered no divine guidance. The prophets, once voices of Yahweh's counsel, were mute, or perhaps they too had turned away from him. The divine favor, the very source of his strength, had undeniably departed. The crown upon his head felt like a leaden weight. The responsibility for his people, for Israel, pressed down upon him. He saw the faces of his soldiers, their eyes reflecting his own dread. He heard the silent prayers of mothers and wives. Defeat meant more than just a lost battle. It meant slaughter, enslavement, the desecration of their land. His mind, a whirlwind of strategic anxieties and spiritual despair, could find no solace, no flicker of hope. He was a king cornered, a warrior disarmed by an unseen hand. The silence of God was his most formidable enemy. In this abyss of desperation, a memory surfaced. The memory of Samuel, the stern, unwavering prophet, the one who had anointed him king, then later rebuked him. Samuel, who had spoken with divine authority. His guidance, though often harsh, had been true. But Samuel was dead, gathered to his fathers. The void left by his passing was a gaping wound in Israel's leadership. A desperate, forbidden thought began to take root in Saul's mind. If God would not speak, perhaps Samuel could, even from beyond the grave, from beyond the... The decision solidified in Saul's tormented mind. He would seek out a medium, a spiritist, a practitioner of the very arts he himself had outlawed. 1 Samuel, chapter 28, verse 3, reminds us pointedly. Saul had put the mediums and the necromancers out of the land. What bitter irony, what profound desperation, to now seek solace from those he had condemned. His royal decree, once a mark of piety, now stood as a testament to his impending hypocrisy. Fear, it seems, is a powerful corrosive, eating away at conviction. So the king laid aside his royal robes. He shed the symbols of his authority, his identity. He donned the garments of an ordinary man, a disguise. To be recognized would mean ruin, public shame, and perhaps even danger from those who feared his laws. He chose 2 trusted men, companions sworn to secrecy. Under the cloak of encroaching night they set out. Their journey was fraught with peril, not just from Philistine patrols, but from the spiritual darkness they were willingly embracing. The path to Endor was a descent into forbidden territory. Endor, a name that would become infamous, likely a small, unassuming village, perhaps nestled near a spring, known, it seems, for at least one inhabitant. A woman reputed to possess an ob, a familiar spirit, a conduit to the unseen world, the realm of the dead. They found her dwelling, probably a humble, isolated abode. The air itself might have felt charged, different, or perhaps it was only the king's own dread colouring his perception. He had come this far, there was no turning back now. His last hope rested with this clandestine practitioner. The encounter began with Saul's carefully worded request, "Divine for me by a spirit, and bring up for me whomever I shall name to you." He did not reveal his identity, nor the specific spirit he sought. The woman, wary, immediately recognized the danger. "Surely you know what Saul has done," she countered, "how he has cut off the mediums and the necromancers from the land. Why then are you laying a snare for my life to bring about my death?" Her fear was palpable. She knew the king's decree. But Saul, desperate, swore an oath by the Lord himself, "As the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing." The woman, Perhaps reassured by the solemn oath, or perhaps sensing the profound desperation in the stranger's voice, relented. She agreed to perform the forbidden act. The biblical text offers few details of her methods. Did she draw a circle, light strange incense, chant arcane words? We are left to imagine the scene within that dimly lit dwelling, the flickering lamplight casting long dancing shadows, the oppressive silence broken only by her murmurs, the king stripped of his regalia, a mere supplicant, his two attendants watching with apprehension, the air thick with foreboding. Then the ritual commenced. The medium began her work, to call forth a spirit from the depths of Sheol. A hush fell. Suddenly the woman cried out, a shriek of terror, of dawning recognition. "Why have you deceived me? You are Saul." Perhaps the manifesting spirit revealed his identity, or perhaps in that moment of supernatural communion her senses were heightened, piercing his disguise. The king, startled, tried to reassure her. "Do not be afraid," he urged, but the veil between worlds was now terrifyingly thin. Saul pressed her. "What do you see?" Her voice, trembling, described the apparition. "I see a god Elohim coming up out of the earth." The term Elohim here ambiguous. Not Yahweh, but a spiritual being, a powerful entity, something otherworldly, ascending from the chthonic depths. The description itself evokes a sense of primordial power. A being not of the heavens, but from below. The medium, accustomed to her craft, was clearly shaken. This was no ordinary summoning, no familiar shade. Saul, desperate for confirmation, pressed further. "What is his appearance?" he asked urgently. "An old man is coming up," she replied, "and he is wrapped in a robe." And Saul knew. He perceived that it was Samuel, the very prophet he had longed to consult. The sight, or perhaps the mere confirmation of his presence, overwhelmed the king. He bowed his face to the ground. He paid homage, a gesture of profound respect, and perhaps terror. He had sought forbidden knowledge, crossed a sacred boundary, and now a voice from the grave was about to speak. The silence was broken by the spectral voice of Samuel, or what seemed to be Samuel. His first words were not of comfort. They were an accusation, heavy with the weariness of the disturbed dead. "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" The question hung in the air, laden with otherworldly displeasure. There was no greeting, no solace for the anguished king, only the cold query of a spirit unwillingly roused from the quiet repose of Sheol, the land of shadows. Saul, already prostrate, must have felt a fresh wave of terror. This was not the reunion he had perhaps envisioned. The king, his voice likely strained with fear and desperation, poured out the reasons for his audacious act. "I am in great distress," Saul confessed. His regal composure shattered. "The Philistines are warring against me, and God has turned away from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. He laid bare his utter desolation, his spiritual abandonment. So I have called upon you to tell me what I should do." It was a plea from a broken man, a king at his wit's end, hoping against hope for a word of guidance, a sliver of strategy, a lifeline from the one man he believed could provide it. But the spirit of Samuel offered no such comfort. His response was as harsh and unyielding as his prophecies in life. "Why then do you ask me?" the apparition retorted, "since the Lord has turned from you and become your enemy?" The words were like hammer blows to Saul's already fragile spirit. The spirit confirmed Saul's deepest fears. God was not merely silent, but actively opposed to him, now his adversary. Then came the chilling reminder of past disobedience, the Amalekite transgression that had sealed his fate. The kingdom, Samuel's voice intoned, was indeed torn from him, given to David. The prophecy culminated in a devastating pronouncement. There would be no escape, no divine intervention, no victory. Moreover, the Lord will give Israel also with you into the hand of the Philistines. The nation would suffer alongside its fallen king. And then, the final, personal doom for Saul and his lineage. "And tomorrow you and your sons will be with me in Sheol, in the realm of the dead." Upon hearing these words, Saul collapsed. He fell his full length on the ground, overcome with terror. Weakened by fasting, shattered by the spectral decree, his strength utterly failed him. Section 5. The weight of transgression defying divine law. Saul, the king of Israel, knowingly sought out a woman with a familiar spirit. He actively participated in necromancy, the summoning of the dead. This was a deliberate defiance of God's explicit commands. Leviticus states, "Do not turn to mediums or necromancers, do not seek them out." The penalty was severe, complete separation from God and community. Saul had once upheld these divine laws, purging Israel of such practices. His current desperation revealed a catastrophic spiritual decay. Consulting the witch of Endor was a profound betrayal of his faith and God. This hypocrisy underscored the depth of his fall from grace. The forbidden summoning was more than just a chilling ghost story. It was the final damning act in the tragedy of King Saul. His fate, already precarious due to previous disobedience, was now sealed by this ultimate spiritual rebellion. The grim prophecy delivered by Samuel's apparition was a consequence of choices made. The encounter at Endor serves as a potent, enduring warning. It starkly illustrates the perils of seeking forbidden knowledge, a king's descent into darkness, a lesson etched in sacred scripture. Saul's story is a cautionary tale of the weight of transgression. Section 1. The Silent Kingdom, Unveiling Sheol. Beneath the vibrant tapestry of life lies Sheol, the Hebrew underworld, not a fiery hell nor a paradise, a destination for all souls, regardless of their deeds, the great equalizer, awaiting kings and commoners alike. Imagine a vast subterranean darkness, a place often described as the pit or the depths of the earth. It is a shadowy, ill-defined domain of stillness. Here, power, wealth and wisdom count for nothing. The inhabitants are shades, Rephaim, the weak ones, flickering remnants of once vibrant lives. Sheol is a place of passive waiting, a collective grave for all humanity, silent and deep. The idea of Sheol is fundamental to understanding the Old Testament's perspective on death. It is a stark contrast to the detailed afterlives promised in other cultures. No pearly gates, no fields of Elysium, just the inevitable descent into a common, murky abode. This starkness is precisely what makes Sheol so compelling. It challenges our ingrained notions of cosmic justice. Tonight, we journey into this enigmatic realm. We seek to understand what the ancient Hebrews truly believed about Sheol. Section 2. Echoes from the abyss Sheol in sacred scripture. The term Sheol resonates throughout the Hebrew Bible. It appears no fewer than 66 times, a persistent echo from the depths reminding the living of the ultimate destination. Its presence is woven into psalms of lament, proverbs of wisdom, and narratives of despair. From the earliest patriarchs to the later prophets, the awareness of Sheol looms large. The first mentions of Sheol often associate it with a profound sense of finality. Consider Jacob, mourning his son Joseph, avowing, "I will go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Genesis paints Sheol as the ultimate destination of sorrow, a place where earthly ties are irrevocably severed. It is often depicted as being deep within the earth, a realm from which there is typically no return. Jonah, swallowed by the great fish, cries out from the belly of Sheol. This reinforces Sheol as a place of powerlessness. The Old Testament consistently portrays Sheol as a shadowy realm. It is not explicitly a place of punishment or reward, rather it is the indiscriminate receiver of all the dead. Understanding Sheol is crucial to grasping the ancient Israelite worldview. Section 3. A land of shadows. The nature of existence in Sheol. What was life like in Sheol? The scriptures offer glimpses. Ecclesiastes declares, "For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing." This passage paints a picture of utter cessation, no consciousness, no knowledge, no recompense. Sheol suggests a shadowy existence, a place devoid of the joys and sorrows that mark human life. The inhabitants, often called shades or Rephaim, are portrayed as weak and powerless. They exist in a state of profound inactivity and silence. This is not a realm of vibrant spiritual continuation, a collective slumber in the dust of the earth. If the dead know nothing, then communication with them becomes problematic. What was the entity summoned by the Witch of Endor? If Sheol is a realm of silent, unknowing shades, how could Samuel appear and speak? The dead, according to many texts, are beyond recall. There is no feasting, no fighting, no divine communion, just an enduring quiet, a separation from the world of the living, and significantly, a separation from God. Section 4. Whispers of wonder, nuances in the understanding of Sheol. The biblical portrayal of Sheol is not entirely monolithic. While many passages emphasize its silence, others introduce subtle complexities. These hints suggest that the understanding of the afterlife may have evolved. The realm of the dead held its own mysteries. Consider Psalm 88, a song of profound lament. The psalmist, feeling abandoned by God, cries out from the depths of despair. He asks, "Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the departed rise up to praise you?" These are not statements of certainty, but desperate interrogations. They open a sliver of possibility, questioning Sheol's absolute finality. Could there be awareness among the departed? The act of Samuel speaking challenges the idea of Sheol as a place of utter silence. If the dead know nothing, how could Samuel prophesy? Does God's power extend into the depths of Sheol? These scriptural tensions suggest that Sheol was not always conceived as a homogeneous void. Some scholars propose that there might have been nascent ideas of differentiation. The Old Testament is a library of diverse voices spanning many centuries. These nuances make the study of Sheol a fascinating glimpse into evolving spiritual landscapes. Section 5. Sheol's unsettling legacy, a challenge to later beliefs. The ancient concept of Sheol poses a significant challenge to later afterlife doctrines. Its portrayal of a shadowy, undifferentiated realm for all the dead can be unsettling. Sheol offers no clear moral calculus. The righteous and the wicked alike seem destined for this common, gloomy abode. This lack of immediate post-mortem judgment terrifies many theologians. Sheol contrasts sharply with the hopes of resurrection and eternal life in later theology. It is not a temporary waiting place before a final judgment. For many, it appeared to be the end of the story, a descent into oblivion, or at best a conscious but powerless existence. The good news of later scriptures often involves deliverance from Sheol. The terror Sheol instills stems from its implications for God's justice and presence. If Sheol is a place where the dead know nothing, what does this say about God's relationship with the departed? Does divine sovereignty extend into its depths? Sheol resists easy categorization within later frameworks. It speaks of an older world less defined by intricate moral codes. Sheol is a reminder of the long journey of human understanding concerning what lies beyond the veil. Its shadows continue to provoke thought and disquiet. The Old Testament paints a world teeming with unseen forces. The ancient Israelites understood their existence within a vibrant, often perilous spiritual landscape. Invisible beings moved through their reality. Some were benevolent, extensions of divine will. Others, more ambiguous, their intentions veiled in shadow. This spiritual ecosystem was complex, multifaceted, a realm acknowledged, respected, and often feared. Beyond the realm of Sheol, other entities populated the unseen dimensions. The scriptures speak of beings that were never human, spirits of different orders with different allegiances. Some served the light, others seemed to dwell in darkness. The veil between their world and ours was sometimes thin. Encounters, both solicited and unsought, were recorded. These were not mere metaphors or abstract concepts. For the ancient mind, these spirits were profoundly real. The question becomes one of discernment. When an apparition manifested, how could one ascertain its true nature? This understanding of a populated spiritual world adds layers of meaning to stories like Saul's encounter. Among the spiritual entities of the Old Testament, angels stand prominent, clearly defined as divine servants. The Hebrew word malach simply means messenger. and that was often their primary role. They brought vital communications from Yahweh to humanity, announcing births, delivering warnings, conveying laws. These were not the cherubic figures of later art, but powerful beings, sometimes terrifying in their majesty. Their appearance could inspire awe or even dread, yet their purpose was invariably tied to God's divine plan. Consider the angel who wrestled with Jacob until dawn, a mysterious, powerful encounter that left Jacob transformed, or the angels who visited Abraham by the oaks of Mamre, foretelling the birth of Isaac and the doom of Sodom. These were not passive observers, but active agents of God. They executed divine judgments, as seen in the Exodus story. The angel of the Lord, a particularly potent figure, often acted with the full authority of God himself. These celestial emissaries were extensions of divine power. Their words and actions carried immense weight. Their nature was unequivocally divine in origin. They served God, resided in his heavenly court, and moved between that celestial realm and the earthly plane. There was little ambiguity about their allegiance. When an angel spoke, it was understood as God speaking indirectly. They were instruments of his will, pure and purposeful. No deception was attributed to these holy messengers. Their role was to reveal, not to obscure, to guide, not to mislead. They represented the benevolent side of the spiritual spectrum. Yet even these divine messengers could be overwhelming. Their glory was often too much for mortal eyes to bear directly. Those who encountered them frequently fell down in fear. This underscores the vast gulf between the human and the divine. Even benevolent spiritual power could be terrifying. But their intent was generally clear, their source identifiable. Angels were a recognized, accepted part of Israel's worldview, a testament to God's direct interaction with his creation. They stand in stark contrast to other more enigmatic spiritual entities that lurked in the shadows of belief. Beyond the radiant forms of angels, other spirits stirred. The Old Testament acknowledges entities less clearly aligned with God. Some translations use the term demons, though this concept evolved significantly into the New Testament period. Deuteronomy 32:17 speaks of Israelites sacrificing to Shedim. These are described as not God, new gods their ancestors did not fear. This suggests beings that could draw worship away from Yahweh, entities that represented a spiritual alternative, a dangerous path. Their influence was considered corrupting, defiling, a source of spiritual contamination for the chosen people. The Talmud, drawing on older traditions, further describes these Shedim. They were said to possess some traits of angels, like wings, and some traits of humans, like the need to eat and drink. This paints a picture of intermediary beings, neither fully divine nor wholly terrestrial. Their nature was ambiguous, their motivations often suspect. They occupied a grey area in the spiritual hierarchy, not always openly hostile, but certainly not aligned with the singular worship demanded by Israel's God. Their presence hinted at a spiritual world more complex than a simple dichotomy of good and evil. Isaiah's famous admonition underscores this caution. When they say to you, inquire of the mediums and the necromancers who chirp and mutter, should not a people inquire of their God? Why consult the dead on behalf of the living? Isaiah 8:19. This warning is not just against necromancy, but against seeking guidance from any spiritual source other than Yahweh. The chirping and muttering mediums were seen as conduits to these questionable entities, spirits that might offer knowledge but at a terrible cost. The implication is clear: such sources are unreliable, deceptive. These warnings highlight the perceived danger of the unseen. Not all spirits were messengers of divine truth. Some were deceivers, luring the unwary into forbidden practices. The very act of seeking them out was a transgression, a betrayal of the covenant with God. This fear of deceptive spirits adds another layer to Saul's story. If the entity he contacted was not Samuel nor a divine messenger, could it have been one of these Shedim, these shadowy beings, a spirit masquerading as the prophet to seal Saul's doom? The scriptures caution vigilance against such spiritual counterfeits. Discerning the source. When spirits speak, who is listening? The critical question then arises, how does one tell the difference? When a spiritual entity manifests, offering words or visions, how can its true origin be discerned, divine or deceptive? This is a profound challenge, one that echoes through ages. The Old Testament itself provides instances where this ambiguity is potent. Consider the lying spirit in 1 Kings chapter 22. God himself allows this spirit to entice King Ahab's prophets, to lead them to give a false prophecy of victory, ensuring Ahab's demise. This troubling episode suggests that sometimes even spirits seemingly sanctioned by God can deliver deception. This complicates the neat categories of good angels and bad demons. It introduces the idea of divine permission, even orchestration of deceit for a specific sovereign purpose. If God can use a lying spirit to achieve his ends, the task of discernment becomes infinitely more complex for humans. It implies that not every spiritual message, even if seemingly supernatural in origin, is necessarily true or beneficial. The source might be divine, yet the immediate message misleading, a test of faith or a judgment in disguise. This theological puzzle challenges simple interpretations. The story of Saul and the witch of Endor is a prime example. Was the spirit of Samuel a genuine manifestation of the prophet, permitted by God to deliver a final harsh judgment? Or was it a demonic entity, a shedim, a deceptive shade from Sheol, one that mimicked Samuel to confirm Saul's despair and damnation? The text calls the apparition Samuel, but the very nature of the forbidden ritual invites suspicion. Could a practice so condemned by God yield a truly divine revelation? Or does the context of transgression itself taint the apparition? Theologians have debated this for centuries. The Old Testament provides no easy litmus test for spirits. There is no simple checklist to verify a spirit's credentials. Instead, there's an emphasis on loyalty to Yahweh alone and a deep suspicion of any spiritual practice outside his ordained channels. The prophets of God were the designated intermediaries. Seeking spirits through mediums and necromancers was inherently risky. It bypassed the proper pathways of divine communication, opening oneself to influences that were at best uncertain and at worst deliberately malevolent or divinely orchestrated for judgment. The burden of discernment and the risk of deception was immense. God's unseen hand, permitted manifestations and divine paradoxes. While the Old Testament sternly forbids unsanctioned spirit contact, it also presents a God who is sovereign over all realms, including Sheol and the activities of all spiritual beings. This sovereignty introduces a fascinating paradox. Could God, in his ultimate control, sometimes permit or even orchestrate encounters with the dead or other spirits for his own divine purposes beyond human comprehension? The case of Samuel's apparition at Endor forces this question. If it was truly Samuel, then God must have allowed it, despite the illicit nature of the summoning. This perspective suggests that the prohibition against necromancy is about human agency, about us not initiating contact. It does not necessarily mean God himself cannot bridge that divide or permit a spirit to return under exceptional circumstances. Some theologians argue that Samuel's appearance was such a case, a unique divine intervention to deliver a final, unalterable judgment upon a disobedient king. God, in this view, uses the witch's ritual against its normal function to achieve his own specific, authoritative end. The medium herself is terrified, suggesting this is beyond her usual experience. This interpretation highlights God's absolute power. He is not bound by the rules he sets for humanity. He can work through unconventional, even forbidden means if he chooses. This doesn't negate the warnings against such practices for humans. Rather, it emphasizes that God retains the ultimate prerogative. He can make an exception to his own established order. This idea of divine prerogative can be unsettling. It means that the spiritual world operates not just by fixed laws, but also by the specific, sometimes inscrutable will of God. What is forbidden for us may be a tool in his hand. Therefore, the line between divine and deceptive can be complex. An apparition might be deceptive in its immediate presentation, yet serve a divine purpose of judgment or testing. Or an apparition might be genuinely divine in origin, like Samuel, yet appear through a forbidden channel by God's specific allowance. The Old Testament world is one where God's sovereignty is paramount. He is not limited even by the spiritual boundaries he himself established. This challenges us to look beyond simple classifications and to recognize the profound mystery inherent in God's interaction with the seen and unseen worlds. The core conundrum: a spirit or a spurious spectre, the encounter at Endor, a king's desperate plea, a witch's forbidden craft, and an apparition from the world beyond. But who or what truly answered Saul's illicit call? This question pierces the heart of biblical interpretation. It has echoed through centuries of theological debate. Was it the genuine spirit of the prophet Samuel, a true ghost, or was it a cunning impostor, a demon masquerading in light, a shadow sent to deepen the darkness surrounding a fallen king? The answer shapes our understanding of death, spirits, and divine justice. This is no simple academic squabble. The stakes are profoundly high, touching the very fabric of faith. If it was Samuel, then God seemingly sanctioned a forbidden act. He allowed his prophet spirit to be summoned by necromancy. This challenges the immutability of his laws. It hints at a permeability between our world and Sheol, a possibility that the dead might, under extraordinary circumstances, return. What would this mean for the finality of death, for the sanctity of the grave? These are unsettling thoughts for many. Conversely, if the apparition was a demonic entity, a clever deception designed to mimic the revered prophet, then the implications are equally significant, though different. It underscores the reality of malevolent spiritual forces, their power to deceive, to imitate, to lead astray. It would highlight the inherent dangers of seeking forbidden knowledge, confirming that such paths open doors not to truth, but to delusion. The witch's ritual, in this view, summoned not Samuel, but a player from a much darker stage, one eager to confirm Saul's despair and accelerate his ruin. The scriptural account itself offers tantalizing yet ambiguous clues. The text names the figure Samuel. The prophecy delivered is stark, accurate, and devastatingly final. Yet the context is one of blatant transgression. Saul is acting in direct disobedience to divine command. Could such a polluted source yield a pure revelation? Or does the very act of necromancy taint the result? This core conundrum, spirit or spectre, ghost or demon, remains one of the Old Testament's most perplexing mysteries, a theological crossroads where faith and reason wrestle. Section 2. The argument for demonic deception, shadows and lies. Many theologians tread cautiously around the Witch of Endor. They lean towards a troubling yet coherent explanation. The apparition was not Samuel. It could not be. It was a demonic deception, a masterfully crafted illusion. Their reasoning often begins with God's own prohibitions. Necromancy is an abomination, repeatedly condemned. Would God contradict his own sacred law? Would he allow his holy prophet to be manipulated by a practice he himself declared detestable and defiling? For many, this presents an insurmountable theological hurdle. The scriptures offer further support for this skeptical view. Ecclesiastes chapter 9 verse 5 famously states, "The dead know nothing." If this is the case, how could Samuel appear, speak, prophesy? Hebrews chapter 9 verse 27 reinforces this. People are destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. This suggests a finality to death, a one-way passage. No casual returns, no summons from the living. These passages paint a picture of the dead at rest, or awaiting judgment, not available for earthly consultation. A spirit claiming to be Samuel would thus be a liar. Consider the nature of deceptive spirits mentioned elsewhere, beings capable of masquerading, of offering false comfort or doom. The Apostle Paul, much later, would warn of Satan disguising himself as an angel of light, as stated in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. If such high-level deception is possible, could not a lesser demon convincingly imitate a deceased prophet? Especially to a desperate, spiritually blinded king like Saul. The entity might have gleaned enough information supernaturally to deliver a prophecy that seemed authentic, thereby sealing Saul's fate. Its goal, not revelation, but ruin. The witch's own reaction could also be telling. She cries out in terror, not just at the apparition, but seemingly upon recognizing Saul. However, some interpret her shock as realizing she had conjured something far more potent or sinister than the usual shades she claimed to contact. Perhaps she too was deceived, a pawn in a larger spiritual game. The forbidden ritual may have opened a conduit to powers she did not fully understand or control. A gateway for a demonic entity to step through, cloaked in Samuel's guise. Section 3. The case for divine permission. Samuel's authentic return. Yet, not all interpreters agree on demonic imposture. A compelling case can be made for the apparition's authenticity, that it was indeed the spirit of Samuel, the prophet of God. This viewpoint rests heavily on the straightforward reading of the text. 1 Samuel chapter 28 consistently refers to the figure as Samuel, not an entity claiming to be Samuel or a lying spirit. The narrator and even Saul seem to accept its identity. If the Bible's own words are to be taken at face value here, then we are dealing with the prophet himself. This demands a different theological framework. This perspective champions God's absolute sovereignty. He is not bound by the laws he establishes for humanity. While he forbids humans from practicing necromancy, he retains the power to make exceptions for his divine purposes. In this extraordinary circumstance, with Israel on the brink and its king utterly estranged from divine guidance, God might have permitted Samuel's spirit to appear, not to condone Saul's sin, but to deliver a final, undeniable judgment. A message so critical it required Samuel's own gravitas. The medium in this view becomes an unwitting instrument of God's will. The content and accuracy of the prophecy lend further weight. The Spirit foretells Saul's defeat, the death of his sons, and Saul's own demise. Tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. These pronouncements are specific, grim, and tragically fulfilled. Would a demon possess such precise foreknowledge of God's plans, or deliver a message so aligned with God's previous judgments on Saul? The Spirit's words echo Samuel's earlier condemnations of Saul. There's a continuity of message, a prophetic consistency. This suggests a divine source rather than chaotic, malevolent deception. The message serves God's justice, not demonic aims. Furthermore, the solemnity and authority of the apparition seem more characteristic of Samuel than a mere trickster demon. There is no gloating, no unnecessary cruelty beyond the harsh truth, just a weary pronouncement of inevitable doom. Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up? This question itself suggests a genuine spirit roused from its rest. The terror the apparition inspired in both the witch and Saul could be attributed to the awesome power of a true prophet spirit, especially one appearing under such extraordinary, divinely sanctioned circumstances. God, in his mysterious ways, chose this moment for a final spectral word. Section 4. Patristic perspectives and historical debates echoes through church history. The enigma of Endor is not a modern quandary. It has perplexed and divided theologians since the early days of the church. The church fathers, those foundational thinkers and writers, grappled intensely with this unsettling passage from 1 Samuel. Their interpretations varied, reflecting the theological complexities. Some, like Tertullian and Justin Martyr, leaned towards demonic deception. They argued that God would not permit a holy prophet's spirit to be summoned by pagan or occultic rituals, especially one that he himself had strictly forbidden Israel to practice. The apparition, therefore, must have been a counterfeit spirit. Others, however, entertained the possibility of Samuel's genuine appearance. Origen, a prominent Alexandrian scholar, suggested that while necromancy was evil, God, in his sovereignty, could have exceptionally permitted Samuel to appear. Not because of the witch's power, but by divine will to pronounce judgment on Saul. This view acknowledged the text's literal naming of Samuel while trying to reconcile it with God's holiness and power. The debate often hinged on the limits of demonic power versus the extent of divine prerogative and intervention, a delicate balancing act of theological principles. Later theologians continued this intricate discussion. During the Reformation, figures like John Calvin were generally skeptical of it being truly Samuel. Calvin emphasized God's consistency and the wickedness of the act, suggesting it was more likely a demonic illusion. He argued that consulting mediums was a direct affront to God, and therefore God would not reward such an act with a true prophetic message. The message itself, while true, could have been permitted by God to be spoken by a demon to seal Saul's fate, as God sometimes uses evil for his ultimate purposes. Even within these broad camps, nuances existed. Some proposed that the witch initially summoned a familiar demon, but God then intervened, replacing it with Samuel's actual spirit to the witch's own shock and terror. This attempted to synthesize both the illicit nature of the act and the explicit identification of Samuel in the text. These historical debates reveal the profound discomfort this story has caused within established theological frameworks. It remains a testament to Scripture's capacity to challenge, provoke, and resist easy answers. Section 5. Unsettling Implications, the Enduring Theological Challenge. The varying interpretations of Saul's spectral encounter carry significant theological weight, each unsettling in its own way. If the apparition was indeed a demon, a lying spirit, it paints a chilling picture of the spiritual battlefield. It implies that malevolent forces possess considerable power, the ability to impersonate the departed with terrifying accuracy, to manipulate human desperation and confirm paths to ruin. This view underscores the vulnerability of humanity, even kings, to spiritual deception when divine guidance is rejected. It serves as a stark warning about the unseen dangers lurking beyond the veil, eager to exploit our fears and failings. Conversely, if the spirit was truly Samuel, permitted by God, the implications are equally profound and perhaps more challenging. It suggests that God's sovereignty can override his established laws, that he might use even forbidden means to achieve his divine ends. This complicates our understanding of divine consistency. It also opens a narrow, exceptional window to the idea that the dead are not entirely inaccessible, that Sheol is not always silent, but only if God himself wills it for a specific, weighty purpose. This interpretation can be disquieting, as it hints at a divine unpredictability that defies neat theological systems. The enduring power of this narrative lies in its resistance to easy answers. It forces a confrontation with the darker, more mysterious aspects of faith. This isn't your Sunday school Bible story. Indeed, it pushes beyond simplistic portrayals of good versus evil. It delves into the complexities of divine justice, human desperation, and the thin, often terrifying boundary between worlds. The story serves as a potent reminder that the spiritual realm is vast, intricate, and not always benign, and that human attempts to control or manipulate it are fraught with peril and profound spiritual consequences. Ultimately, the Witch of Endor narrative compels humility. It demands that we acknowledge the limits of our understanding. Whether ghost or demon, the encounter sealed Saul's doom. It highlighted his complete alienation from God. The story's true lesson may lie less in identifying the apparition and more in recognizing the tragic consequences of disobedience, of seeking answers in shadows when the divine light is rejected. The Crooked Key Society continues to examine such files, knowing that some mysteries remain locked, their full meaning perhaps only revealed in a realm beyond our own. Section 1. A practice widespread beyond Israel's sacred borders. The story of Saul and the Witch of Endor. It stands as a stark anomaly within the biblical narrative, a forbidden practice enacted in desperation. Yet what if we told you this was not an isolated curiosity? That the act of summoning the dead, necromancy, was a known, if often shadowy, thread in the vast tapestry of the ancient Near East, the world surrounding Israel. To understand the depth of Saul's transgression, we must first pull back the curtain on these neighboring cultures. Their beliefs, their fears, their own dealings with departed spirits. Across the sun-scorched lands of Mesopotamia, along the fertile banks of the Nile in Egypt, and throughout the city-states of Canaan, the dead were not simply gone. They were elsewhere. They inhabited realms just beyond mortal sight, and crucially, they were believed to retain a form of agency. an ability to influence the living, for good or ill. This belief fueled a spectrum of interactions, from reverent ancestral worship to the clandestine rites of those who sought direct communication with these powerful shades. Why did the ancients seek to bridge this chasm? The motivations were as varied as human experience itself. They sought guidance in times of crisis, much like Saul. They yearned for hidden knowledge, for glimpses of the future. Sometimes they aimed to appease restless or malevolent spirits, believed to cause misfortune, sickness, or even death. The departed were thought to possess wisdom, or at least a perspective untethered from earthly concerns. To speak with them was to tap into a potent, unseen resource, a dangerous, yet sometimes irresistible temptation for many. Understanding this broader cultural landscape is paramount. It illuminates the world in which Israelite religion took shape. The stern biblical prohibitions against necromancy were not issued into a vacuum, an empty spiritual space. They were a direct response, a conscious differentiation from the pervasive practices of surrounding peoples. Saul's journey to Endor, therefore, was not just a personal failure. It was a step back into a world of beliefs that Israel, under divine guidance, was striving to leave behind. The shadows of these ancient rites stretch far and wide. Section 2. Echoes from the underworld Mesopotamia's spectral rites. Let us turn our gaze eastward to the lands between the rivers. Mesopotamia, home to Sumer, Akkad, Babylon and Assyria. Civilizations that mapped not only the stars above, but also the terrifying geography of the netherworld below. They called it Irkalla, or Kur, the land of no return. A vast, dusty and gloomy realm ruled by Ereshkigal. Here, the spirits of the dead, resided as pale shades. Their existence was often portrayed as bleak, a shadow of life, yet these spirits were not entirely cut off. They could, under certain conditions, interact with the living. Within Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets we find whispers, evidence of rituals designed to summon and consult these. Perhaps the most famous literary example comes from the Epic of Gilgamesh. The hero Gilgamesh, desperate to understand death after losing his friend Enkidu, manages to call up Enkidu's spirit from the netherworld. The spirit describes the grim realities of that shadowy existence. This tale, though epic, reflects a cultural understanding. Communication, however difficult and fraught, was deemed possible. Special practitioners existed, individuals skilled in these esoteric arts, those who dared to mediate between the worlds. These individuals were sometimes known as Or, literally, one who raises a spirit of the dead. Their methods often involved specific ritual actions. Libations of water, flour or beer might be poured. Offerings might be made to appease the spirits or the gods of the underworld. Some texts hint at the use of pits or openings in the earth, conceived as conduits to the subterranean realm of Irkalla. These rites were not casual affairs. They were serious, potent undertakings, performed with a mixture of fear and necessity to gain information that the living world could not provide. The Mesopotamians held a profound respect, often tinged with fear for their dead. An improperly buried or neglected spirit could become malevolent, causing trouble for the living. Necromancy, in some contexts, could therefore also be a form of diagnosis or appeasement. To understand why a spirit was restless and what it required, it was a complex interplay of belief, ritual, and the enduring human desire to pierce the veil of mortality, to seek answers from those who had already crossed into the great mystery. These ancient rites reveal a deep-seated human preoccupation, shared across cultures, a yearning to connect with what lies beyond familiar shores. Now, let us journey southward to the ancient land of Kemet, Egypt, a civilization renowned for its elaborate funerary cults, its monumental tombs, its intricate beliefs in an afterlife. Unlike the often gloomy Mesopotamian underworld, Egyptian beliefs offered the potential for a more vibrant continuation. The deceased, if properly prepared and judged righteous, could hope to join the gods in the field of reeds. Yet, this did not mean the dead were entirely separate. The Egyptians too maintained channels of communication with those who had passed into the Duat, their spiritual realm. While direct necromantic summoning akin to Saul's desperate act is less overtly detailed in Egyptian sources than in Mesopotamia, interaction with the dead was deeply woven into their societal fabric. Letters to the dead are a fascinating testament to this. These were inscribed on bowls or papyri placed in tombs. Living individuals would write to their deceased relatives, seeking help, asking for intervention in earthly affairs, or sometimes complaining about problems caused by other spirits. This practice implies a belief that the dead could read and, importantly, act on behalf of the living from the afterlife. The role of priests and lector priests was crucial. They were masters of ritual, guardians of sacred texts. They performed the rites that ensured the deceased's successful transition and maintained their blessed state as an effective spirit. These spirits were not merely passive shades, they possessed power and could influence the world. Magicians too dealt with the spirit world, though their practices could sometimes venture into territory deemed more dangerous or illicit. The line between approved ancestral veneration and more direct, manipulative forms of spirit contact could be thin. Egyptian beliefs emphasized the continued agency of the deceased. The dead were not simply silent and powerless in their tombs, they were active participants, albeit from another plane of existence. This created a cultural environment where seeking their aid or fearing their displeasure was a natural aspect of life. The elaborate tomb provisions, the ongoing offerings, were all part of maintaining a positive relationship with the departed. These dialogues with the departed, though perhaps different in form from the dramatic summoning at Endor, reveal a similar underlying conviction. The veil between worlds was permeable and spirits could indeed be addressed. Now we draw closer to Israel, to the land of Canaan, the cultural melting pot where Israelite identity was forged. The Canaanites, a collection of peoples inhabiting the Levant, shared many cultural and religious traits with their powerful neighbors. And like them, they possessed strong beliefs about the dead and practices for interacting with their ancestral spirits. This context is vital for understanding the Old Testament prohibitions. They were not abstract warnings, but direct responses to the very real and prevalent spiritual practices of the region. Practices that Israel was commanded to reject decisively. Archaeological discoveries and texts, such as those from Ugarit, have shed light on Canaanite religion and their views of the afterlife. They revered their ancestors, they often translated as shades or healers. These were considered powerful entities, perhaps even deified ancestors or chthonic deities. Feasts were held in their honor, and they were invoked for blessings. This veneration suggests a belief in their continued influence and the likelihood of rituals designed to communicate with them, to seek their favor, or to gain their otherworldly wisdom. The lines between honoring ancestors and necromancy could easily blur in such a cultural milieu. The Hebrew term ob, used to describe the Witch of Endor, is particularly significant here, as noted in our earlier segments. Scholars have long debated its precise meaning. Some suggest it refers to a ritual pit, an opening to the underworld. This aligns with practices found in other Near Eastern cultures, including Mesopotamia, where pits were used to summon chthonic entities. If this interpretation holds, it connects the Witch of Endor's actions directly to a wider tradition of necromantic technology. A method for physically creating a space where the living and the dead could supposedly meet. Therefore, when the Israelite law in Leviticus or Deuteronomy condemns those who consult an ob or a knowing spirit, it is speaking directly against these entrenched Canaanite customs, and by extension, against a broader ancient Near Eastern worldview. Israel's theology, with its radical emphasis on the sole sovereignty of Yahweh, sought to create a clear distinction. All spiritual power, all guidance was to come from God alone, through his chosen prophets and priests, not from the earthbound spirits of the dead, nor from ritual pits. Saul's desperate act at Endor was a profound regression, a fearful retreat into the very spiritual landscape Israel was called to transcend. The dust of centuries may settle. Yet these biblical ghost stories, these chilling whispers from Sheol, refuse to fade into mere legend. They grip the modern imagination, a testament to their primal power. The tale of Saul and Samuel's shade still sparks debate, still raises questions. Echoes from Endor resonate even now. Their spectral presence lingers. In contemporary faith traditions, these narratives serve a dual purpose. They fascinate, yes, a glimpse of the forbidden, but they also caution with solemn gravity. The Old Testament's warnings against necromancy, against seeking spirits outside divine channels, are not dismissed as ancient superstition. They are heeded as timeless admonitions. Boundaries between worlds, once drawn, remain sacred, best left undisturbed. The legacy of these spectral encounters reaches far beyond simple ghost tales. They compel us to ponder deeper truths, the nature of the soul after death, the reality of spiritual realms unseen, the subtle deceptions of forces that oppose light, and the profound consequences of choices made when facing the silence of God. These stories enrich our understanding of the complexities within sacred texts. The fascination, therefore, is not merely morbid. It is a search for meaning, for understanding. What did these ancient writers truly intend? What timeless lessons are encoded within these accounts of spirits and summonings? The Crooked Key Society believes that these shadows hold profound insights, inviting respect for the unseen and contemplation of the mysteries God keeps. The human heart, in its eternal quest, still yearns to pierce the veil, to know what lies beyond the final breath. This ancient desire, seen in Saul's despair, finds its echo in modern spiritual seeking. The allure of hidden knowledge, of direct contact with worlds beyond our immediate grasp, remains a potent, sometimes perilous force. The methods may change, from Endor's pits to New Age channels, but the impulse endures. And so, the lessons from these Old Testament files retain their sharp, cautionary edge. They speak of the inherent dangers in bypassing divinely ordained paths, of the spiritual devastation that follows when fear, rather than faith, guides our steps. King Saul's tragedy is not just historical, it is a timeless archetype of disobedience, and the terrible price paid for seeking answers in the darkness instead of the light. Here at the Crooked Key Society, our mission is not to transgress, but to understand these ancient boundaries, to explore the shadows with scholarly care. We believe that what is hidden should at times be thoughtfully revealed, not for cheap thrills or forbidden power, but for the wisdom these narratives impart. The sacred archives hold many such files, each a key to a deeper understanding. The Old Testament, a wellspring of truth, is also a landscape of profound mystery. Its depths are yet to be fully charted. The forbidden ghost story of King Saul is but one entry in its shadowed ledger. As we close this file, remember, the unseen world is vast, its secrets many. Keep your discernment sharp, and your keys to true wisdom always close at hand. Until next time, truth seekers.